A loved one and then being forced to battle not only your grief but one of the country's largest super funds, forced to endure months of delays for money that's rightfully yours. Well,
one of Australia's biggest super funds today saying sorry.
We know that as an organisation we have let them down and we need to do better.
Cbus accused of abandoning thousands of its customers and their families.
They are in their worst possible time of their life. Widows have tried to claim death insurance. Why it is that Cbus has not been able to look after people in their hour of need.
These delays are unacceptable, but we're not withholding money. We stand no benefit, absolutely none at all.
Australia's corporate watchdog ASIC taking the $94 billion supergiant, headed up by former Labor Treasurer Wayne Swan, to court, alleging the fund mishandled $20 million worth of death and disability insurance claims.
We allege that Cbus delayed reporting these issues, and when it did report the issue, it provided misleading information about when it first became aware of the problem.
10,000 grieving and vulnerable families have been left in limbo. Some claiming life insurance after the death of a loved one, others claiming disability payouts after workplace accidents. Their claims delayed, the majority, by more than a year.
Extraordinarily, that equates to more than 50% of Cbus's total claims at that time.
We're talking about people who are faced with someone passing away, a serious disability, having to call up their fund week on week, month after month. That has severe psychological impacts as well as financial impacts.
The embattled fund is blaming high staff turnover and poor training at an outsourced administration team tasked with processing the claims.
We are still responsible for it. We need to ensure as best as we can that we can rectify it.
Trustees cannot outsource accountability when it comes to claims handling.
Cbus today claiming it's still better than most.
Our insurance policies, because they do cover situations that many funds don't, so dangerous occupations, heights and so forth, are more likely to pay out. Most funds pay out on average about 10% less.
It's fair to say that we do think this is a broader industry issue.
So in an industry worth $3.9 trillion, is this just the tip of the super scandal?
Superannuation fund complaints have been rocketing up in recent years. Consumers are really in the dark. Waiting a year for a death benefit is just far too long.
widow Karen Redhead has had to fight to access her late husband's super payout. She lost her husband Jamie to cancer. Today is actually the 2-year anniversary of his death. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. It must be a tough day, a poignant day, a painful day to talk about this. How are you doing?
It's kind of, I don't know, today I feel kind of numb. So, yeah, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I think you never really know how you're going to feel till you get there.
I'm so sorry, Karen. It's absolutely devastating. How long did you actually have to wait to receive your husband's life insurance and super?
Well, I waited 10 months, but I only really got paid because I actually went on radio to complain about it. So I don't think I would have got paid that quickly without doing that.
I mean, it's so great you got paid, but that's not the way it should happen. I mean, people shouldn't have to be accessing mainstream media for that to be delivered. I know you've got 3 kids. I just can't imagine how difficult it must have been dealing with your grief, looking after your kids, fighting, the superannuation company. What was that all like?
It's hard to explain. It's probably beyond anyone's imagination. Just losing your partner is the hardest thing you could ever imagine. And you really don't think about all the other things that are going to happen. So there's actually lots of paperwork, and some of it's easier and some of it's hard. I felt like this should be an easy thing. I was listed as a beneficiary. I'm the sole beneficiary on the will and the executor, but it wasn't at all. I had to give them the documentation several times. I constantly emailed and phoned and followed up, and nothing really happened. And it got to the point that I felt nothing was going to happen unless I did something like go on radio, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Of course not. And there's the anguish of the process. There's also just the money factor, the payment not coming. How would you describe the mental and financial toll of all that?
I don't know. It's very hard to separate what was the mental toll of the super and what's the mental toll of just grieving someone. It added to it, though. It's a whole lot of extra things you're having to do that you really don't want to, that you're forcing yourself to do, but you really need to do because we had no money and I have 3 kids to bring up.
How does it make you feel that thousands of other families have been going through the same thing?
Well, makes me feel pissed off, actually. It's pretty bad. It's bad enough that I had to go through this. It's awful to hear that thousands of other people are going through it too. And I hope that something changes.
Cbus say this wasn't deliberate, it was poor training by a third party. Is that good enough?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think, from what I've read and other articles, it hasn't just been Cbus. There's been a couple of super funds that have been involved in it. I think Cbus might have been the worst. I don't know. I didn't deal with any of the others.
Well, they say they aren't the worst. That's actually part of their defence. I mean, what...
Oh, well, that's not a very good defence.
Right, exactly. Well, certainly not as far as the industry is concerned. That's a terrible defence. So I guess the question is, if they're right and this is the way it is across the industry and it's systemic, what do we do? Like, what sort of change would you like to see?
Well, I think industry is heavily regulated in other areas. Can't we regulate the time frame that people can access people's super? Maybe we have 2 time frames, one for that's more straightforward and one that's a bit more difficult, and put a maximum allowable time frame.
Well, Karen, you're a brave woman. You are a strong woman. Thank you for your time.
That's okay. Thank you.
So good of her to speak to us on this day.
Absolutely.
Especially.